flip the channel when we hear the word Syria, or actually many of the channels are not even covering the word or what's happening in Syria. So I was hoping to begin the talk with a short video that is an updated version of what is happening, something produced by an American producer who been to Libya first, likes to cover war zones apparently, and then survived Libya and then went to Syria and did produce a short video. I felt this will help at least set the tone, let us know what is happening as up to date, and then hopefully I can address the issue, the context, in terms of where we stand now, and maybe hopefully what can we do in the near future. So if you can give me 1 minute to track the video, we'll play it. I think everything is set.
Avast virus database has been updated.
We know we're safe. That's good. I'm going to let it buffer for a minute so we don't get interrupted, just in case it seems the connection is a little bit slow. But before I begin this, maybe I'll talk about the context of the area in general, the Middle East. And I want to make sure I measure our time correctly. What time do we finish? What time do we start the Q&A?
Why don't we plan on starting about 8:10?
8:10 for the Q&A, yes. Perfect. The region in Syria, where Syria is the Middle East, obviously, is an area where a lot of turbulences have been going on for a while, because there's a history that involves way beyond our modern time, or at least it started after World War I. World War I is the time when the Ottoman Empire ruled until that time for 600 years the whole region, known now as the Greater Middle East. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, Egypt, North Africa, most of that area was ruled under one country called the Ottomans. The Ottomans sided with the Germans in the First World War. And then when they lost, the Allies, mainly the UK, Great Britain at that time, and France, decided that once they win the war, they will divide up the area into small countries divided between under the French or the British control. A famous agreement was known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And Syria, Lebanon, most of North Africa fell under the French. Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, much of the Arab Gulf countries were under the British mandate, British rule. Now, these countries were split up in a way that didn't make a lot of sense. Meaning, I know, for example, people who are from the same village that is split in half between Lebanon and Syria. So it's the same family where their cousins are Syrians, they have a passport, they're Syrian, and their cousins are Lebanese. And what separates them is not literally a small street like this, a small alley. But obviously, since there was a split of the country, that the border made bigger, so in order for them to visit each other, they have to go through a system of crossing international border. Similarly, ethnic groups were split up. So a lot of tribal Bedouins in the southern part of Syria were split between Syria and Jordan. A lot of Bedouins between Syria and Iraq. Kurds were split into several countries: Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, and so on and so forth. And now there are different theories into why this happened. Some of it is mainly to keep the area tense, because the best way to rule is to divide, right? Divide and conquer. So if you make sure that the Sunnis don't trust the Shia, and the Arabs don't trust the Kurds, and the Muslims don't trust the Christians, and the Christians don't trust the Muslims, and then you add another factor, obviously that's what the whole topic for another day, the creation of the State of Israel, then you also have the Muslims and the Christians and the Arabs not trusting the Jews, and vice versa. It allows for foreign intervention, because everybody depends on the outside intervention to help protect them from the inside enemy. It's typical, not unusual, unfortunately. But with that context, you see new countries that didn't exist before, new nationalities that didn't exist before forming. And the areas that have been controlled by the colonialists, by France and the UK, made sure they always appointed corrupt leaders. Because this area is very important strategically. The oil was starting to be discovered. The region itself in terms of the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the connection also is an important trade route for ships, for business. I'm talking about mainly for the Western countries. So for them there was an important role in keeping that area under control or under the influence of these governments. The French, the UK, and then later on the US added to the equation. So, with that context, one ruler after the other in the Arabian area, the Middle East area, actually was not known to be democratic. So most of the country was not ruled democratically. With the exception in the Arab world, with the exception of Lebanon, most of the countries there did not see anything that is democratic, anything that's respectful of human rights, constitutions. They have good constitutions, but little implementation. So what happened? Syria itself witnessed several military coups until 1964, when a newly formed, relatively newly formed political party called the Arab Nationalist Ba'ath or Revival Party, Socialist Party. It's a claim to be socialist, claim to be nationalist. Maybe the original founders, to their credit, we can say, were true to their values. So they were nationalists, they were socialists, and the party spread in the Arab world, all the way in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in many parts of the Arab world, but specifically became very powerful in Syria and Iraq, to the point where actually, through military coup, they were able to take over both countries. Iraq was ruled by the Ba'ath Party until the fall or the ousting of Saddam Hussein, who was a member of the Ba'ath Party, the Arab Ba'ath Socialist Party, and Syria was ruled by the other branch, which, by the way, both were at odds with each other. They were fighting each other, killing each other, placing car bombs in each other's countries. So they were not, although they belonged to the same ideology or claimed ideology, they were at odds with each other. Now, from a fair perspective, anyone who looks at the rule inside Iraq or Syria, they can tell you that both rulers, the Assad family in Syria and the Saddam Hussein family in Iraq, had little to do really with the ideology of the Ba'ath Party. So they just used it to take over, and then it became a dictatorship. It became a family affair, a tribal affair, sectarian affair. Really nothing to do. There was really nothing to do with socialism. At the beginning, when the Ba'ath Party took over in 1964, there was some socialism, and actually they confiscated properties from people. They tried to implement their form of extreme socialism, something similar to communism, actually, the way it's applied. But eventually it became a fascist rule. The Ba'ath Party ruled not as a socialist party or not as a nationalist party, but actually as a fascist party, where kids are taught, where basically it became the party of power. It is not just another party in the system, it was the only allowed ruler of the government. They appoint everybody, including every member of the ministry. In order to become a manager at a school, public school, you're appointed and approved by the Ba'ath Party. It became a fascist system, where kids are taught from early age to sing and praise the Ba'ath Party and the president himself, and the system as you imagine in any fascist place. Nothing different in Syria than other places. So in 1964, as I said, the Ba'ath Party took over Syria. In 1970, Bashar Assad's dad, who is from the northern part of Syria, took over. He's part of the Ba'ath Party. He was a minister of defense. He was a minister of defense, and he took over, became the president, and suddenly changed the whole system in Syria, where eliminated all opponents, including from the Ba'ath Party. Most were executed or placed in prison, and eventually. So eventually they took over, and it became truly a fascist system around one person. The free media was eliminated in Syria, free press, free speech, free political organizing. Opponents were placed in prison, executed for those who insisted on having an opinion. Trade unions were punished. Members of the trade unions were forced to accept appointed rulers and organizers from the government who actually praised the government and worked with the government fully. What we had to do as people who were witnessing in Syria, it became a point of realization that there's actually the Syrian people had absolutely no freedom. Elections were made, fraudulent election, where the president was winning with 97, 90, or 99%, depending on the election. So the year he wasn't popular, he would win by 97%. When he was popular, he would win 99%. And obviously, these were not real elections, they were referendums, as they're called. The yes or no referendum, and it doesn't matter what you voted, the results were announced early on, known early on, and it's, as I said, 97% in the least popular of the election. And in that environment, most Syrians lived in fear and intimidation. It was a police state. No one tried. Whoever tried to speak up would end up in prison or executed. When a city in northern part of Syria dared to challenge the regime, called the city Hama, the city itself was eliminated. Almost 40,000 people were killed. Over 20,000 men were forced to disappear. Were taken by the government, almost like half the population of the city. It was a lesson. That was in 1982. It was a lesson. Everybody realized that you don't mess with the Assad regime, and everybody went into silent mode until December of 2010. In December of 2010, the beginning of the Arab Spring started with Bouazizi burning himself or setting himself afire and dying actually in Tunisia, in opposition to what is happening in Tunisia. Basically, the whole Arab world was suffering a fate similar to the people of Syria. A dictatorship, no democracy, no human rights. But Syria was really one of the worst. I think there were out of the 22 Arab countries, 3 countries really had the worst to deal with. Libya, Syria, and Tunisia. Iraq. Tunisia will be number 4. Libya under Gaddafi, Iraq under Saddam Hussein, Syria under Assad, and Tunisia under Ben Ali. Next comes Mubarak, and then the rest all one after the other, in terms of how bad they are. And I say why they are bad, because, why they're all, mostly actually, except for the Lebanese government, all of them are undemocratic. But some are undemocratic, but they're not repressive. Like if you go to the Gulf countries where they're not elected, they're emirs, they're kings, they've inherited power, but there's so much oil money that they can buy the loyalty of the people. So if people are upset, just flood them with money. You know, free schooling, free healthcare, free jobs. If you get married, you get a bonus. If you have a child, you get a bonus. If you wake up, you get a bonus. If you sleep, you get a bonus. So if you have enough money, that it keeps people from complaining for the most part. Although that is changing because there's poverty growing in Saudi Arabia and other places. So it started in Tunisia with a through peaceful protest. When he burned himself, people complained, were on the street. I don't want to go too much into details because I think most of you are familiar with the Arab Spring. It started in Tunisia in December of 2010, then in Egypt in January of 2011, then in February 2011 in Libya. And in all of these, it started as peaceful. The government was taken by surprise, and they were forced out either by the people or the army, who were afraid that the country would go out of hand. So it worked successfully in Tunisia. It worked successfully in Egypt, where Mubarak was forced out. At least that's what we thought at that time. Look what happened. The ghost of Mubarak is back with all these crooks. And in Libya, it unfortunately took a violent turn because Gaddafi wouldn't give up, and he decided to fight till the end. But eventually, the revolution won in Libya. In Syria, it started in March 15 of 2011, peacefully, for 6 months peacefully. Every day, people would go out on the street in every city in Syria, and the government would crack down through heavy force, using deadly force against these peaceful protesters, killing literally dozens and dozens in every protest. But for 6 months, people continued to resist any temptation to use violence. Eventually, many people from the army started defecting because they refused to shoot at their own people at their own cities. And as they defected with their personal weapons, an AK-47 or whatever, they would go back to their cities or village, and either they would be targeted by the regime and killed, or they would have the chance to defend themselves and their family. And then slowly that number grew enough to build courage enough in the cities and the villages where people would join them, and eventually they formed the Free Syrian Army. It could be a ragtag type of army. Mostly civilians would join their friends who defected just so they can defend their neighborhoods. And eventually the war started between the regular army of Assad and the Free Syrian Army. Syria today is split almost in half. Different areas are under the control of the Free Syrian Army, other areas are under the Assad Army. So what I'm going to do, hopefully we can play it. I don't know, I haven't seen the buffering. If it works, great. If not, we can go back. It's not that crucial.
I used to wear fancy dresses and high heels, but not anymore. I'm 24. 24 years.
You said you're going to spend a good part of your 20s in war.
Yeah. I have to do this for my country. I have to give what I can give. It's pretty important to let the world see what's going on. I think nobody knew Syria, even on the map, before this revolution, and now everybody knows what's going on in Syria, and that's because of the press covering what's going on. That's really important. Somebody has to see all this. Somebody has to know what this monster is doing to us and to his own people. And it's making sure that somebody's going to know. All the people in the world are going to see this, hopefully. See us suffering. See the civilians suffering. I mean, it's not a way to do this. It's wrong.